used to take classes here, and with Dr. Pelham McDaniels a few years ago, took a class here on black baseball, so it was always nice to come down here and hang around and get to walk around the museum every Wednesday for free, and very much enjoyed it, so much that my wife and I named our cat Satchel Paige. So I think most of you guys are familiar with Satchel Paige. His introduction goes without that. Anyway, I want to thank Ray for the opportunity. Very pleased to meet Dr. Conyers as well. We had a conversation yesterday on the phone, and very conversational in nature, so tonight hoping to continue that. He talks very easily, very well about this history, and I can learn a great deal. You all can learn a great deal from him as well, so really looking forward to this. But we'll keep it conversational in nature, and also would like to thank the Kansas City Royals for winning last night. Otherwise, it might just be me, you, and Ray here tonight, because everybody else will be watching the game back home. So, all right. So, all right. Well, so growing up, you know, I looked at sports as kind of an outlet. My father was a high school basketball coach and was so for 45 years. And as a small town high school basketball coach, he coached golf and baseball and softball and women's golf and men's golf and all those sorts of things. So sports has been pretty predominant in my life, and its influence has been great. But what I'd like to know is what kind of piqued your interest in this arena?
In addition to just us, maybe the woman out there playing the horn, it might have just been be you and her if the Royals didn't win last night, right? Real quick, first of all, I'm no stranger to this facility. I lived in Omaha, Nebraska, and taught at the University of Nebraska in Omaha for 7 years. So Kansas City was like, you know, that was the escape. Getting out of Omaha, that was the escape to have a sense of culture and civilization. And I would bring my sons, who none of my sons played high school baseball, but I would bring them here, and this, you know, we'd go to Gates and we'd stop here, and then we'd go over to Columbia, Missouri, where my mentor, where he taught at the University of Missouri. I'm, you know, a former athlete, but I'll give you the disclosure. Living in Texas, originally from New Jersey, football is like beyond what you could probably ever imagine in Texas, from Little League to high school to college. And so when my sons were in Little League, it was fun and it was a game. By the time they got from middle school to high school, I stopped being a fan, and I was actually concerned about their physicality. They had to work out, they had to eat right, just for them to be competitive, not for them to try to see them going on to the next level. So when I look at sport for me has been a way of financing my son's education, and that they're student athletes first, you know, and then the athletic component comes in the secondary. And, you know, being at practices, talking with parents, but not disclosing the fact that I'm a university faculty member, I would just hear some of the narrative. And from an empirical level, it was like a concern, because, you know, I would see people trying to bet on 7th and 8th graders like they were going to go play in the SEC, the Big 12, and you just never know. When the kid is in the 7th grade, you know, he might be the biggest kid in the 7th grade, but he may not grow in 8th grade. That might be it. He might, you know, grown out. So in putting this piece together, I kind of took, you know, those experiences as a parent, then as an athlete, and then also as a faculty member on a university campus where I've had professional athletes in my classes. And I'm very proud to say I've seen a number of those professional athletes go on and get their degrees. They may not have gotten their degrees when they left to go into the league, but they came back and got their degrees. So the issue of education is kind of stale and boring, but it's one of impact in that we don't wear out young men and women and trying to focus on a dream, but focusing on how they can stretch all of these different opportunities of just education, looking at livelihood into a career, and then building on for their families as well. So, I mean, that's what brings me to it, is that, you know, I played. I don't try to live through my sons playing, but if we can use this as a vehicle to pay for that education, yes. And so far, we've been able to do that with my oldest son, and now my youngest is getting ready to move on. We're recruiting him out. As a matter of fact, he's at Blinn College. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Blinn, but Blinn is a JUCO where Cam Newton played just before he went to Auburn. So I've got a 6'1", 240-pound linebacker that I'm trying to feed every week and then get him off for, you know, the next level, keep him sane, till December, and he can take his associates and go on and play. So yeah.
All right, so your book, it talks about the race and the intersection of race, gender, and identity throughout the athletic world. One of the quotes that I pulled that talks a little bit about race was spoken by Ian Hanley Lopez, who is a critical race theorist, and he talks about how nearly every facet of society throughout American history and how race kind of plays along with that. So his quote is, "Human fate still rides upon ancestry and appearance. The characteristics of our hair, complexion, and facial features still influence whether we are figuratively free or enslaved. Race dominates our personal lives. It manifests itself in our speech, our dance, our neighborhoods, and our friends. Our very ways of talking, walking, eating, and dreaming are shaped by notions of race. Race determines our economic prospects. The race-conscious market screens and selects us for manual jobs and professional careers. Red lines financing for real estate, green lines our access to insurance, and even raises the price of the car we need to buy. Race permeates our politics. It alters electoral boundaries, shapes the disbursement of local, state, and federal funds, fuels the creation and collapse of political alliances, and twists the conduct of law enforcement. In short, race mediates every aspect of our lives." I think that quote speaks to a lot of what happens in our conversation as Kansas Cityans goes along that race. And it's certainly wider with some of the examples we see in Ferguson recently, the issues with Adrian Peterson, the issues with the quarterback at Florida State, Jameis Winston, and how all these conversations are geared around race and how they're viewed differently. Even the conversation that Ernie Johnson had last night with Lorenzo Cain, his first discussion point was, "You came from a single parent home. You've overcome this." I mean, and it's like there's this one solid narrative that kind of goes beyond that, but what you talk about in your book goes way beyond that, much deeper and from a different viewpoint. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, just very quickly. Oftentimes, when you live in a market culture, the concept of race is discussed within a structural aspect. So almost as if you're just talking about bodies and not about people. But in this sense, what we were able to do in this text was to discuss race from a cultural analysis. So therefore we had Native American scholars talking from a cultural aspect regarding mascots. We had Asian American scholars talking about the whole Jeremy Lin component when Jeremy Lin was in New York. Now, I'm going to acknowledge to you, that's not where we were going with the book initially. Mainly we had predominantly African American scholars talking about this issue of race, but in sport, from a cultural analysis, but then we started getting faculty from kinesiology. Then I was getting emails from scholars in Native American studies all the way across the country at Washington State. And they said, "Hey, I've got wind that you're working on this project, and I need space." And as we engaged and discussed, we found that there were commonalities rather than looking at specificity. So when we start to look at the issue from a cultural analysis, now we're looking at people of African American descent. And now we're saying is that what level of responsibility and accountability do you have not only to yourself, but to your family, then to your community? This is why it's relevant that we have a discussion like this here in the heart of the community right here in Kansas City. I mean, we could do this at U of H on my campus. We could do this in Jersey. We could do this at UMKC. But it holds relevance because it becomes a point of responsibility and accountability when we're talking about sport. And sport is not just an issue of entertainment, but this becomes a vehicle in which the African American community, especially when you're dealing with the consistency of disparate treatment with the issue of economics and politics and those other components, that you don't get a fair deal. So you might have to break your deal with what? Playing ball. And that pays for your education. That, in a sense, may do what? That might become a stepping stone for a niece or nephew to find out how to fill out a FAFSA form, how to do a student loan form. And so sport isn't just an issue of entertainment for people who have been disparately treated. It becomes another avenue. It's not the only avenue, but it becomes an alternate avenue in, trying to provide productive lives, develop careers, and looking not just within this spectrum, but looking maybe 15, 20 years down the road.
You talked a little bit about, you know, the essence of community and how sports plays a role in that. You also spoke about how sport can be entertainment, but it also encapsulates, as you were mentioning yesterday, business, educational impact, economic impact. For example, today, civic pride. I think everybody is all about the Royals. Fans who haven't, you know, I've seen two types of jerseys. One's from 30 years ago and one from 3 days ago that people have bought. There's not a whole lot in between, but now all of a sudden, with this success, it's galvanized this community.
Yeah.
And in doing so, you know, it's one of those conversations where what accountability does the organization have to this community? What type of accountability do the players have? And in that, we talked a little bit about how athletes connect with the community as well. So, and here at the Negro Leagues Museum, Negro Leagues players formerly in the 20s and 30s were of that community. They were of that fabric. They were doctors, they were lawyers, they lived next to the people that would come watch them play. And now as we move into the 2000s, the 21st century, there's a big disconnect. They aren't a part of that community anymore. So what examples can you provide, and what can you provide on that?
It's a good question, Jay. When we talk about business, right, we often think of, like, you know, multi-million-dollar, you know, we're thinking Fortune 500, we're thinking, you know, CEOs and execs. I want to work from a micro to a macro, right? So we're saying race and sport. An example that's close to home, right? Like, my oldest son was on scholarship playing college ball. He would get a reimbursement check every year because it would be like an overpayment. So he had enough to pay for everything. And then whatever, and if he, you know, he said he didn't want a meal plan, then they gave him that money back, okay? As a result of that, he would get back funds each semester. And as a college student, he would say, well, I got some grip, I'm getting paid. Dad, did my reimbursement check come to the house? And, you know, I would say, and again, and I'm a single parent raising both my guys, right? And again, my disclosure is that, you know, my wife for 25 years passed away. So I had to raise these two young men from 7th grade and 10th grade up to now they're, you know, young adults in their 20s. And had a great partner. So in losing my wife, I didn't lose a wife, I lost my best friend, right? But anyway, he would want to get that money. And I would say, leave it alone. And he said, what? I said, look, you know, what school is paid for, they pay for, and then I'll underwrite you the rest. All right, so the quickness of the story is, he kept saving those checks, right? Well, he wasn't saving them, I was saving them. I took them away from him, right? And he was able to have enough funds after 4 years that when he graduated, we had enough money to put down on a condominium. Now he's 20, he bought a house at 22 years old. So that's your business. Now he's walking around like, what, you're not paying on rent. Now you're paying on mortgage. So, but he couldn't see that then. But I had to step up to the plate and just say, act like it doesn't exist. So we were trying to work with him while he was an undergrad to start developing a business sense now. Stop wasting. Stop spending money that you haven't gotten already, but you know it's coming. Now, when we start developing an ethos like that, and then we look at corporate business, that develops a different kind of context and lens for us to have a discussion. So now we're not asking the businesses to save our communities. We're saying, it's like what they would, it reminds me of like when I'm in Ghana, and you go to the wood carvers village, and you know, there's like maybe 50 wood carvers, and there's like 25 on each side of the road, and you're in a rural area, right? And this is a rural area, it's dusty, right? And the wood carvers would tell me, you know, me with my American mind, I would walk into the village, and I'm like, okay, I want this and this. And then I would dismiss everyone else. And the wood carvers would say, wait a minute, you know, first of all, you're coming here from America, so we know how you Americans are, show a little respect. And they said, if you're gonna come up in this wood carving village, you gotta visit every vendor. So I said, I gotta visit all 50. They said, you gotta show respect. And so I'd get a bottle of water, and I gotta go in, I gotta take a look, see what I like. And what I found was that there were places that I hadn't gone that I actually found things that I liked. Well, what they were saying was, we know that you have this American currency, and we know we live in this poor rural village, but you still gotta show respect. That's what happens when you're in a market culture. There's always the issue of leveraging. It's like what I would call corporate bullying. You know, it's not like two people come to the table. I know I don't have as much finance as you. I know I don't have the structures you do. But on principle, you're going to show some respect. And so we got to have a context and an ethos within our community that when we deal with corporate people or corporate personnel, that it's based on respect, not likeness. It's based on respect and some level of honesty. And I think, you know, perhaps we might get, you know, different kinds of discussions. It may not measure out any more than what it is, but at least we've stretched the field enough that people in corporate, I think that they understand the issue of respect because they think long term.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about that yesterday with the things that are going on over in Ferguson. You know, the obligation that an organization has to their community in which they play. You know, a young man is shot and killed wearing a St. Louis Cardinals hat. It's placed on top of his casket at the funeral. And at the same time, you have another side of St. Louis painting or taping Darrell Wilson, you know, names on the back of their jersey, refusing to recognize the humanity or the spirit of this young man and what happened, and basically dismissing it. The protest. And all this is taking place within yards of Busch Stadium, which is in St. Louis, is an icon. The Cardinals are within, you know, they are part of that community, and they have a certain social capital. But can you talk a little bit about the social obligation that they may have to that community to help address this situation? Well,
you know, the situation that occurred in Ferguson is one that is tragic, and is one that, you know, I mean, it's a continuity that has occurred, you know, for, you know, decades in this country. Now we see it in the contemporary period, and the unfortunate circumstance with this is that the movement that's on the ground, the intent is good, but it's usually moving with a coalition politics. By coalition politics, Martin Luther King made a comment after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. He said this country has a 30-day moral conscience. After 30 days, we're going to go back to normal. We're going to act like nothing ever happened again. And so when you're looking at issues where there's a termination of life, I don't know if it's adequate to apply coalition politics. We may need to apply alliances. There are people who are on the ground and they're going to see this thing all the way through. And I have people from the outside of Ferguson, Missouri, coming in, telling the people of Ferguson, Missouri, what's good for them, or trying to provide leadership. I think the people who live in Ferguson, the people who live in St. Louis, they know that community. They live there. They got to deal with that. So when you're dealing with, and business structures understand, you know, coalition and alliances. You know, they might just say, look, just wait them out. You know, give them a couple of bucks. You know, 30 days, they're gone. It'll be like this thing never happened. But if it's an alliance, then you're starting to put into effect what role does this community have in being a priority to this organization that brings in billions of dollars of capital over a period of time? And if the community is not a prioritization, then how does that become a fit between the organization and the community they're in? Like, you know, so you're going to exist there, you're going to make billions of dollars, but the community is not a priority to you. We're not talking about being nice to anybody. This is a business component. How does this community become a priority to how you're making your billions of dollars? But that's an alliance stretch, that's not a coalition. So, you know, as I've been like watching on the news, I think perhaps some of the outsiders who have come in, people who are not residents of Mizzou, people who are not residents of Ferguson, I think they perhaps may need to take note from the folks who live there who are on the ground. Listen a little bit more, talk a little bit less, and then develop an alliance to be able to communicate with the business community. In that sense, we have an alternative way of approaching it. Rather than 30 days, it's over, everybody just kind of goes back to normal. Some people get stipends or get all kinds of different, you know, cash flow gifts for leaving town. And then the folks from Ferguson are still left in the same predicament that they were previously.
What's interesting to me is that you know, people look to these larger organizations or these larger agents of change to affect that change, and not the owners or the players. They walk this very tenuous line. You know, they depend on the community. They're the lifeblood of how they raise their revenue. So which side do they alienate? Do they choose moral over money? You know, how do they navigate those waters? How are they able to choose where do we make a stand? Do we not say anything and risk alienating this part of the community, or do we make a stand and try to do those social changes? And in this venue here, we talk about some of the changes that were made and some of the active decisions that were made to help effect some social change, whether it's Jackie Robinson or Larry Doby or any of those organizations that made a stand. Now, of course, you know, it can be argued that they made money or they made those decisions based on the pursuit of money or the pursuit of success based on the talents of Negro Leagues baseball players, but it can't be denied that they did make change, or they did make an effect that did dramatically change the landscape of Americans as it pertains to race.
Well, the political climate was different for them because they lived in a segregated society. So they were not given the privilege of having that alternative. Here in 2014, you have the opportunity, but are you consciously aware of even how to contextualize the information, to even know how to draw the kind of query to ask for what it is that you're proposing? In other words, do you really know what you want, and do you know how to frame the questions to ask for it? You know, so you have, you know, and it stretches also on the academics. You know, like you have a student says, well, I'm a good student. Or here, maybe perhaps another example would be this. You have a faculty member, right? And Dr. Doswell, he's familiar with these kind of ideas because he talks to cats all the time. You got a faculty member who says, the new faculty member, they come to university, and they say, you know, we have a dean here who has to evaluate all the time, right? You got a new faculty member comes and says, I'm going to write the great American historiography. I ain't going to talk to nobody. All I need is some new equipment. I'm going to go in my office. I'm going to get my ProQuest certs. I'm going to get a little grant money, and I'm going to write the great book, right? It doesn't work like that. Why? Because in order for you to get tenure, there's one very soft variable. People got to like you. Right? Second thing is, you know, who's going to review your book? Third is now you've got a situation in the academy where it's not enough if you write the book. Now it's citation analysis. So you wrote the book, you labored to get this contract, right? But nobody cites you. So now what they can do when you come up before your RP&T committee, Reappointment Tenure Promotion Committee, they can say, hey, you got a book out there, nobody's citing you. So what's the use of your book, right? So it means that what? You've got to be able to connect and network, not name drop, network with other folks. This is what we're just talking about with building those kind of, not coalitions, but alliances. How do you network? And, you know, so in contemporary times, folks think that, you know, that really has nothing to do with me. I'm done with it. I've got mine. That's it. Well, you can be that naive to think so, but, you know, it doesn't operate like that. You're going to have to be a team player. And by getting tenure at the university, it says that what? I'm a team player. I'm in. I support the aims and objectives of the university, right? And then they'll give you a little wiggle room every now and then. If you write enough, that they'll let you have some discourse, right? They'll give you a little wiggle room here and there. But, you know, you got to be able to produce. So I think that, you know, like we just had the situation, you mentioned the young man from Georgia who just got pinched for the autographs, right? You know, you've got the situation with the young man at Florida State with the crab legs and the other situation. Then you got the situation with the Dallas Cowboys running back with the designer underwear and cologne. And so it's just cost him $29,000 for $100 worth of merchandise, right? Thought you were alone, huh? Got pinched now. So now what do? See, now you're part of the continuum with other African American people. And unfortunately, what has occurred is that from Little League to middle school to high school, you've been given privilege, you know. And now there's finance on the table, and more people are watching. And now you're no longer responsible, now you're held accountable. And that transition isn't always articulated very kindly from the business community when they're getting ready to tax you. Because they're just going to tell you, you owe and you got to pay. So I think that, you know, some of the contemporary athletes, you know, they're going to have to make these kind of decisions on their own. They have the Fritz Pollard Alliance, which is an organization of African-American coaches and scouts. They've got, you know, training sessions, but, you know, Harry Edwards had worked for years with the San Francisco 49ers, And so you sort of kind of work that he put in with debriefing and looking at their draft picks. He worked also with the San Francisco Giants, who are playing in the World Series, well, perhaps maybe playing in the World Series.
No, not yet. They still got to win one more.
And he also worked with the Golden State Warriors. So, I mean, you've got to have people, it's not like you're a good athlete and you just kind of come in, but there has to be other support mechanisms around it. And I think that's where we kind of lose it, that's where we lose the focus of attention. So, you can go out there and think that, you're going to do all this great stuff by yourself, but, from a business plan, it just doesn't play itself out like that.
And we talked a little bit yesterday about, the presence of money that seems to drive this machine that has become college sports, the realignment based on power conferences. Mizzou moving to the SEC is a local example, but the ripple effects that it has all across Division I has been tremendous. And now we're talking about the prospect of paying student athletes, which is something that goes against the perception that the NCAA is all about amateurism and that they try to preserve that. So what's some of your thoughts and there's a good chapter in here about the college conference shift. How do you feel about the impact upon the student athletes and how that's shaped things?
It's evident that student athletes I'm a parent of a student athlete, so I have to give that disclosure. Even with scholarship, they get hungry. I was just mentioning to Dr. Hort, you're paying for my son to go to school, but he's got to go to practice, he's got to go to study hall, then sometimes the coach may want to go a little bit over with the film, so he misses the calf meal. Then he still has to go to study hall and study, so they don't when you come up the field, and even if the calf is closed, you still got to go put your study hall hours in. So then he wants to get something to eat that night, and if you're on a meal plan, you're on a meal plan with the school, but that doesn't stretch to Kroger or to the grocery store. That's just on campus. So a lot of money gets paid for, just before I got here, my son was sending me a text message, transfer, I want to go get something to eat, long film day. You're going to pay for food, gas, and car repair. That's outside of the NCAA. So, they need more. I think perhaps maybe, it has to be stretched with gift cards or something that they would be able, not just confined to that campus, but they can get some of those resources. But they need, it's evident that athletes need more. But the university is going to win, right? And you know why the university is going to win? The university is going to win because they're a nonprofit. But the university is going to win because they're a nonprofit and they got endowments. So the university gets to make money off what they call their corpse, which they get to use the principal off that corpse. And so that interest is allowed to be used. Now, if we can be that creative with endowed professorships and endowed chairmanships, why can't we be that creative with student athletes, right? So we've got a faculty member making $250,000 a year, right? And then he's got an endowment for maybe another $100,000. So that's $350,000. Now he already has enough money to buy plane tickets and eat, but he's got an endowment fund for $100,000. That means that he's not talking about 14-day advance notice to buy a ticket. If he needs to get to China, he can get to China in 48 hours. If he needs to get to West Africa, he can get to West Africa in 24 hours. If we can be that creative for scientists, humanists, social scientists, with having endowments for them, could we not propose something that could, be a supportive measure for athletics? And then we gotta have an evaluation criteria that we keep it clean, so that you might have ADs who might want to have slush funds and things like that. We got to keep it clean so that they don't start getting creative with the funds. But and then with some institutions, we got to keep in mind that you can't stack scholarships. So if you're already on scholarship, is there another legal name that we can get for support for resources, food, and perhaps transportation, and that could be levied somehow into an endowment? Yeah.
And I believe that Duke University is moving, their men's basketball program right now is moving towards endowing their entire men's basketball scholarship. Now that's certainly an extreme example at a private institution. I take a little bit of approach. I used to former basketball coach at UMKC as well, and I see the athletes that have a number of access to special tutors, extra, they get trainers, they have access to a lot of things that normal students don't have. So I see both sides of the argument. I see that, I remember getting in trouble once because we had about 8 years ago, we had a real bad ice storm. And the student athletes, we came back from a 5-day road trip, power had been off, all the food in the refrigerator was spoiled, it was done. At 6 o'clock on a Sunday night, this was back before UMKC had a student union, and these kids had nothing to eat. And so we go to the store, or I think it was JoJo's down on Main. Coach said, hey, take and grab something to eat. And the next day I'm nailed by the NCAA because I turned it in. There was nothing that I did that was wrong. I mean, the kids got to eat, they've been traveling all day. We're not going to an extravagant buffet. It's the same meal that we've eaten in pregame. So I understand that food becomes a big issue. But at the same time, it speaks to college athletes generating hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars, the larger ones, and they're allegedly not-for-profit. And so there's some sort of disconnect there between coaches who are making millions, administrators who are making millions, and student athletes who are struggling just for that last 5%. Most of everything is taken care of. I'm sure he's not wanting for a lot, but it's that little bit extra, and it's that 10% while we get taxed, pre-tax and post-tax on our paychecks for insurance. It's that little bit extra that helps kind of push the envelope to make ends meet. We talked a little bit about the impact of domestic and substance abuse upon the image and community. Talk a little bit about what roles do you think the league, the organization, teams, and individuals play in this development? We talked a little bit about with Peterson and Winston, but what roles do you think these leagues have with educating players? Is it the players' fault? Is it the organization's fault? Where can we make sure to help alleviate some of these issues? And some of that lies with, it's been going on since sports have been around. There's always been that. The difference is now, it's on Twitter, it's on social media, it's on Facebook, and it's there for everybody to see. So that accountability is out there immediately. And I know there's things that I did in college that I probably wouldn't want posted on Twitter or Facebook, and now we're asking these 18, 19-year-olds to handle it.
Well, the context is different for NCAA and then also with professional athletics. But there's some commonality with the end. Well, if you start with like professional athletics, the prioritization of the team owner and the coaches are diametrically opposed to each other. And now you might think that that's paradox. They're diametrically opposed, right? Team owner wants to make money. He wants to sell those boxes. He wants to make money. There's not too many she's, so I think I can say he, right? With team owners. He wants to make money. That's it. That's it. That's all he sees is dollars. May not even be so much of an issue to him if the team is winning or not. Now, if the fans get noisy and say, we're not coming out because y'all losing, then the team owner says, then we have to look at coaching personnel change. Not coaching personnel change to win, but coaching personnel change because the fans are getting a little bit disruptive, right? The coach has to keep disruptions at a minimum because what? Because he's got to win to keep his job. So one is focused just on primarily finance, not championships. The other one has to win to retain their job. And they're paradoxically against each other. So what you see is that, the coach might say something to a star athlete. And the star athlete votes and goes to the owner and says, I don't like what he just said to me. Well, who are the fans concerned about? Do they come to see the head coach, or do they come to see that star athlete? Who makes the owner money, right? Who makes the owner money is the star athlete. So that's who's gonna get the attention. Now how can I supervise you, and I know that there are autocratic moves going against me every day, that if I'm trying to supervise you to do the right thing, you're gonna go over me to my supervisor, and you're actually almost like a pseudo-supervisor to me, and the other players know it as well. So that's what happens at the professional level. The collegiate level was very interesting when you mentioned conference realignment, which Earl talked about in the book. With this conference realignment piece, you've got, when we look at conferences, and we had a think tank session on this, Earl said, like, look, you've got kids who are in Texas, but they're in a conference with Connecticut. So what happens when, especially like in basketball, which is really going to be a challenge, right? Football, you only play the team once a year. So you're either going to play them on your turf or you play on their turf. Basketball, you got to play them on your turf and their turf. Midterms, you in Texas, you got to go to UConn to play, right? Then you getting back at 6 o'clock in the morning, off the bus, half tired, half asleep, and you got a midterm at 2 o'clock. Why did we propose that kind of realignment for your conference when we could have put you in a conference where you are in maybe no more than a 1 hour flight from most of the teams in your conference? We got you traveling halfway across the country, and so it doesn't work out for the student, but what it does do is works out for the university, because the university gets paid. So if some friends of mine played at Iowa, so let's say, for example, if you have 5 schools from the Big Ten make it to bowl games, Indiana doesn't have to worry about it. Why? Because they're going to get a share. They're going to get a percentage of everybody from the Big Ten goes to bowl games, right? So if you're with your conference that you're in, even if you don't have a good team, even if you're not competitive, you're going to get rewarded financially because you're in good company with UConn. So I know that my campus, U of H, which, I support, right? We're always going to get paid, right? Because we're in a basketball conference with UConn. UConn just won the national championship, right? Although they beat UConn last year at Houston, but you've got UConn, you've got some of these other schools. So they're always going to get a dividend off being in the conference with those schools. So the colleges played a little differently. Professional levels, it's about finance and intake by that owner.
The other thing about college basketball is that the coach plays a much larger role in managing the players. Very rarely does a player win an argument with a coach at the college level. Usually the coach will win out versus the complete opposite at the professional level. You have Magic Johnson didn't like, I'm drawing a blank on the coach. Paul Westhead, so he got Pat Riley. And so there's always that overhang there. UMKC is in the WAC.
Wow, okay.
And it's not the WAC that you and I grew up with.
Okay.
This is not, it's New Mexico State, Seattle, Cal State Bakersfield, Utah Valley, Chicago State.
That's a different WAC.
Bakersfield, and Grand Canyon, which is, interestingly, a for-profit university at the Division I level, which is interesting. So our student athletes are flying halfway across the country into 2 different time zone changes and competing in every sport.
It's a challenge. We put this issue of finance so much at the apex, we've lost track of the principle. And here we are in the academy, and so my thought is that these young men and women, they've got to receive their degrees. But we've got to be working collaboratively. Faculty got to work collaboratively with athletics. I attempt to work collaboratively in our athletics department. And I also, when I have athletes in class, I will sidebar them. I will sidebar them and say, let's get this degree. If you can grind and give that kind of time on the field, let's get this degree. If you need tutorial sessions, then get to the tutorial sessions. Don't fall behind. Stay in contact with your professors. Don't take shortcuts. And many of the young men are receptive to it. So, but at the professional level as a whole, it's a different kind of game. It's a different kind of game, so.
Very good. Fascinating discussion. And I hate to cut it off, but the hour's getting late, and we want to get the questions from the audience. But before we do that, we want to thank you both for your time this evening. It's customary here at the museum to give gifts for our moderators and speakers. So for both of you, you'll get the coveted Negro Leagues Baseball Museum stainless steel coffee mug, which has been received by just a number of dignitaries here at the museum. So there'll be one for both of you, and I think you're working hard on your next book and finishing that degree. We'll have our mug for you. he's going to finish. And then for you, Dr. Conyers, again, thank you for supporting the museum. I have a special gift for you, and I had the opportunity to go down to the University of Houston and speak to one of his classes, and it was a wonderful opportunity. Good, very bright young people there. So we have here one of the commemorative postage stamps by artist Kadir Nelson, and a special framed art. Please accept that with our compliments.
No, stay.
There we go.
Please accept that with our compliments, and thanks for coming out and supporting Black Studies and the museum.
Great.
And we've got a few minutes, maybe a couple of questions from the audience. Would like to, if you just raise your hand, I'll come to you with the microphone. If you have a question or a thought, we've got some on the back row, so let me come over here. Please tell us your name. We'll share the mic.
I'm Adrienne Walker Horde, and my question to the gentleman is, what advice do you give to young men and women who are coming into the collegiate academic arena and still want to maintain their sport, other than get your degree? What kinds of advice are you giving to them to maintain them in this arena?
Okay, well at UMKC, in the athletic department, if I run into them, first of all, our women's basketball team was #1 in the nation in GPA. So we have a very strong student athlete services program there. But for the most part, student athletes, I've found in my experience, are very good at time management, because they know when their classes are going to be, they know when practice is going to be, they know when they have to eat, they know when their study hall is, so they know what their day is going to be, is going to look like for the most part. So they have to be very organized. The other thing I like to tell them is, you don't take shortcuts on Coach Richardson's court, so I don't expect you to take shortcuts in the classroom either. That goes into just sneaking out the back door at Swinney. I tell them, go out the proper door. Yes, you have to check in every time you come in, because last time I checked, if you make 5 baskets in a row, you're going to want credit for those stats too. I need my stats to turn into Mr. Tyler. So we need all of that stuff. So a lot of it's just talking to them as men and women. You talk to them and you respect what they do, because what they do is very difficult. It's time consuming, it's demanding, it's physically draining and mentally draining, but you encourage them and you try to give them as much support as you can. But at the same time, I'm not going to drag them through my class. If they're not holding their weight, then I go right to their coach. I shoot Ursula Gurney an email like, hey, they're not doing what they need to do, may need a little pep talk. Feel free to use your halftime locker room language with them. So.
It's a good question, Dr. Ward. One, I would probably say no advice, but what I consistently share is focus, and I use it in a context that focus. Sometimes people think focus means you like looking, staring at something, right? Like you got my attention. I'm looking at that box. That's not focus. Focus is learning how to prioritize from this high to this high to this high. And so, in the focus is because sometimes they get peers who get in their ear, whether they be male or female. And so, just like they get bad suggestions on academic advisement, because they're not talking to a professional academic advisor, they're listening to a friend telling them, you should take this course. Don't listen to him or her. They're here in school with you. Talk to somebody who's getting paid to do this, right? Then you don't have to stay an extra year, extra semester. So, focus and go to class. Every day may not be your A game, but just go. Get there. Part of the reward is just being there, just being present. Just being there in your science class, being there in your history class. You never know what you just might miss, And so, being there, being focused, And the third thing would be take a minute. And I've had to do that with my own sons, right? Because, I've had my son say, Dad, he's not playing me. He's got me with the twos. I'm supposed to be with the ones. Ones mean you start, right? Twos mean that you back up. So, you ain't hoping for nobody to get hurt. But, just in case, you're going to go in, right? And, I had to tell my 23-year-old, I said, just stop. He's like, I'm going to quit. I'm tired of this. Sometimes I was like, don't worry about it. I said, just take a minute. And he had all his boys around him. They was building. They had him all pumped up. He was all pissed off. I was like, he's a junior in high school. Like, I ain't playing. I said, you're going to play. Next time you get mad, don't be around anybody. Go home and be by yourself. Go watch a movie or something. And what did he learn from it? played him as a 2. He got in after they scored 21 points. He had 3 sacks. Big game. I said, look what you'd have missed. And then the coaches kept him in. And he played and he started and there was no problem. But he was ready to throw it all away, you know. And I was like, no, don't throw it all away, you know. My youngest one just went through something similar. The conference they played in, school scored 72 points on them. Coach wouldn't let him go across the line in a junior college game. He was like, I'm ready to give it up. I said, no. I said, guess what? I said, when the scouts come, you want no film in which 72 points were scored that night, son. I said, we didn't have to edit the film, right? Let your coach deal with that. And he was like, now the coaches are calling him. And he's like, you know, the coach said, what happened to that 72 points got scored? He's like, he said, Coach, I was not at that game. I wasn't hurt. That was a coaching decision. Like, there you go. So sometimes it's just got to take a minute. Because you got to remember that they're 20 years old. And they're going to give us 20. No matter how mature they are, they're going to give us 20 and 22. And they should. You know, they're going to be a little pissed off, a little hot-headed. That's being 20. But if they can take a minute, stay focused, and go to class. Go. And I think, you know, those 3 things I just shared, both the men and the women.
Very good. We first timers over here to sign your books if you want to purchase them from Museum.
You were talking a bit about the transition from responsibility to accountability, and certainly the idea of professional athletes in particular as role models. And I certainly remembered in the Charles Barkley, Dennis Rodman era, where there was almost a rejection of that attitude. I think they in fact said, I'm not a role model. And if you had any thoughts about the impact of those players on that concern in professional sports.
Well, we see the outcome assessment, right? The outcome assessment is Charles Barkley has a gambling problem. You see the outcome assessment of it is Dennis Rodman needs some counseling. So they didn't understand what role they had been placed in by having, you know, wealth and having this level of attention. And there's a noted historian by the name of John Henry Clark, who's out in New York, and he said, people who are given power and they don't know what to do with it, it will be taken from them. And so, you know, Charles Barkley, he's not that kind of figure now. You know, he's not the point person. It's Kenny Smith and some others, right? It's Ernie Johnson who's the center point of that, right? It's not Charles, right? You know, Dennis Rodman, we don't know where Dennis is at, right? You know, I mean, we're still trying to find him. Made a lot of money, but unfortunately, and we got to look at the family support mechanisms behind it. We're not judging anyone. We're just saying that a number of these men and women have been taken advantage of. And the variable we can see is that a lot of their finance has been taken from them. So 30 for 30 did a piece entitled Broke. And if you ever get a chance, you can look at it on YouTube. What was interesting about this piece was it was one of the few pieces that almost transcended race with sport, that it showed both black and white athletes who were taken advantage of and their money was taken. Kurt Schilling, Bernie Kosar, Andre Rison. Remember, broke, I mean, destitute. And then, you know, and I've had the opportunity to have former NFL players who are in my class who are now retired and they're living off their retirement. And they would say, like, you know, it's unconscionable for us, right, as academicians, for somebody to actually be liquid for $45, $50 million and now you're destitute. Like you're on, you know, welfare and you're on, you know, workman's compensation. They didn't just blow their money. Someone, you know, I mean, it was mismanaged. They trusted friends who perhaps weren't friends. A lot of loans that didn't get paid back. So I think with Barkley, you know, Rodman, they're just really like the continuing saga, and that and they didn't have that support mechanism or that team around them. But you know, you can look at what's his name, Jamal, Mashburn. Now you look at him, and he's like, so you see, there's a different kind of situation. He owns, you know, car dealerships. He went back to Kentucky, got the degree. He's, you know, aspiring business personnel. So it says not just Jamal Mashburn was successful. There must have been a good team behind him that helped him, support him, and they didn't cash cow. But the disparity is that the more they're going to get cash cow, than those who are going to be successful. So we just got to have families and, you know, and support mechanisms behind them. So, I don't know. Okay. Excellent. That was a dean's question. I had to acknowledge the dean.
We'll make this our last question of the evening.
I got one quick question. As a father of a student athlete, I just wanted some advice because this is kind of like, it's difficult for me because we're in a different school district, and he's told me the other day, he was like, Dad, I was walking with my girl, and these two other girls came up and was like, we're expecting a lot from you this season. You know, you got a superstar there. And I was just like, son, you're gonna have to learn how to deal with those things. I don't really know how to, articulate to tell him what to do or how to handle it, because I never was an athlete like that, had that type of attention. So I guess I'm just kind of asking for some advice.
Well, probably doesn't matter what sport. I would just say, as a parent of two high schools, two college athletes, one thing is, again, so no faculty here, right? This is the parental side, right? So I got the dad's hat on now. One is that when more than one young lady would call my house, I wouldn't let my sons hide from them. Like, I'm not telling nobody you're not here. Don't be having all them young ladies call my house, And I don't think it's cute. And they'd be like, what? If a young lady came and knocked on my door, and my son would be saying, tell him I'm not here. I'm like, he's here, go to the door, answer, right? And so, because oftentimes we think that those are like the machismo things for young men. So sons think that, they look to dads that we're gonna like support them. But what I was saying to them is, you need to start very early on with knowing how to focus on one woman, right? Even though you're not married to her, you need to like learn, because look, I don't know how most men can do it. Most men can't take focus and attention on more than one woman. That's just reality, right? You're gonna get yourself in trouble, and then you can't keep an archive of lies and all this other stuff going on. Just focus on one. You start learning that from high school. And from there, it becomes a learned behavior. That you don't have to wait till you get married to know how to focus and have your attention on just one woman. The other side to it is, compliments are good. Women are going to compliment you. But, you say thank you and you let them go and you just keep going. And that they just stay focused. So, now my sons will say, Dad, you're corny and you crush our fun. And that's what I'm there for, because I ain't their friend. I'm supposed to crush their fun. I'm supposed to, right? But at the same time, I want them to understand, to respect women, be able to understand how to feel compliments, that a compliment doesn't always mean attraction. It's just a compliment. Like that's it, They just said you're a good ball player. They ain't say nothing about, your haircut, this and that. What do you think she really meant? Like they go get existential about it with their buddies. Like, it was just a compliment, let it go, stay focused, and if you can do that, and the better athlete they are, the more attention they're going to get, but it's going to be both good and bad. And the bad will usually outweigh the good, so there'll be like the bad attention from people who are jealous, both men and women, and there'll be very few who will be good. So, so he'll just have a small circle, just keep it tight, have a small circle of friends, and both men and women, and he has one girlfriend, or one friend that he likes to keep company with. That's positive, yeah. Don't take too much of the other. Just take it as a nice compliment and let it go. But some dads, not me, but some dads wow, my son is all the women want. I'm like, I'm not listening to all of that. Like, no, that's how you're gonna get yourself in trouble. That's how you're gonna have these multiple mamas. Stay focused on one. Yeah. So, okay.
My question surrounds the business of the large sports enterprises, and I think you inferred that they were businesses and they generate quite a few dollars, billions, and particularly from the communities. Are there measures and tools that can be employed to ascertain if a community is benefiting or not benefiting from that enterprise. And I'm saying around the country, we have a lot of student athletes who come from a lot of urban communities. And in Kansas City, like we have the Kansas City Chiefs. And I don't know that the athletes get back to the community. And thank you, sir. Get back to the community and do those things to uplift and instill some of the very things that you're saying relative to the young people, young athletes coming up. That's my question.
The NFL is the largest business in the United States.
Okay.
It's the largest business, not the largest athletic business. It's the largest business in the United States. I understand I have a general understand what you're referring to, so I'm not going to wordsmith it. I think when you mention benefit, it's not an issue of benefiting, but is there room for prioritization? If there's room for prioritization, that means you see us as human. If you see us as human, then we get to have a conversation. Once we get to have that conversation, we need to know what we want. But we also need to know the difference between what we want and what we need. But we don't even get to the point of a conversation because we don't even know if we're a priority. And because we don't know we're a priority, then people who are making billions of dollars or trillions of dollars, we don't even know if they even see you as human or just a fixture. So they pretty much like, yeah, and what? You know, like, what are you addressing? Well, we're saying that, you know, you're making your finance here, you're building this capital here, so we are a priority. Now, what we have to do on our side is go back and learn the infrastructure so that when we come in, right? I mean, the reality is that we need to know the answers to the questions before we ask them. Because if you go in the room and you're talking with, you know, somebody who's, you know, business personnel, and they're making billions and trillions of dollars, we're going to depend on honesty. Like, we ask them a question we don't know the answer to, they tell us anything. They tell us, oh, you can go find it in Disney World, right? So we need to be able to get educated so that we understand what are the proxemics in this, and then understand that we don't have the same kind of leveraging tool, but we don't want to leverage. We want to haggle. We want to bargain. And from there, then that's where we find a fit. We won't find everything with these businesses, but we at least need to be able that when we engage them, we know what we want, but we know what we need. So when we go, what we want, that's our A game. What we need, that's the accommodation, that's the B plan. And from there, we develop and we stretch the field with other organizations in the city. So, you know, Dr. Horton was coming in, you know, he said, well, look, you have businesses that don't understand the relationship of partnering with an academic institution. They just kind of say, like, you know, we are just the profs and stuff. There's a number of different benefits that you get in the business community if you're partnering with an academic institution. But businesses that are successful, they won't tell you that they're partnering with academic institutions. They won't let you know that. There's another office for that. But with African American businesses, we need to know what benefits there are with partnering with universities. Why? You can write grants, there's other things they can come in contact with, you can get internships. They sound corny, but they allow you to stretch the field and have a different kind of conversation with other business personnel. So I think that, you know, the NFL, largest business in the United States. Most of the people, I mean, look at, maybe with the exception of the current commissioner league, they've all been lawyers. You're dealing with litigating people. Paul Tagliabue, he was a member of one of the largest law firms in D.C. Some of the others, so they know law, they know corporate law, they know constitutional law. So you've got a player who, you know, doesn't understand the rules of society, hasn't gotten the support and resources from the family, and you're dealing with a corporate lawyer, and that person is your commissioner of your league, they're gonna tax you. We gotta have preparation for those kind of things. And it's doable. I think it's doable, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I want to wish you much success with the book and, of course, your work at the university. Again, folks, if you'd like to buy a book, Dr. Carnes would be glad to sign it. We have them on sale in the gift store. This concludes the week of wonderful programming in association with the university. We thank you all for supporting it, and we look forward to another great Focus Week next year, if not soon. All right? Thank you. Enjoy your evening, and good night.